Do you really believe what you saw in the Blair Witch Project was just a movie? What if I told you that behind that shaky camera in the middle of the woods lies something far darker? Secrets even the most attentive fans never caught. There's a layer of mystery the film never explained. One that still lingers in urban legends, dark rituals, and hidden symbols scattered throughout the Black Hills forest to this day. A lot of people walked out of the theater scared of the dark, but very few realized how deeply that story touches something far more primal, the ancient fear of the unknown. Is the forest just a backdrop? Or is it something bigger, a malevolent entity disguised as nature itself? The clues are there, hidden among the trees and between the scenes. This story didn't start with the missing filmmakers. It began with Ellie Kedward, a woman accused of witchcraft, left to die in the freezing cold of Burkittsville, and who maybe never truly died. Ever since then, the disappearances started piling up, and the symbols, they never stopped showing up. Nothing about that place feels like a coincidence. If you think the horror ends when the credits roll, think again. The truth is, the legend of the Blair Witch didn't just reshape psychological horror in film. It still haunts anyone who dares to dig deeper into what's really behind the camera. So what about you? Are you happy with the story they gave you? Or are you ready to uncover what they tried to hide? Stick with me till the end, because today we're going to unearth the hidden secrets of the Blair Witch that the movie never showed you. And what you're about to see might just change the way you look at the forest. Forever. Before it was ever a horror movie, the Blair Witch was already a whisper among the trees of the Black Hills forest, on the outskirts of Burkittsville. The legend traces back to the 18th century, when Ellie Kedward was accused of luring children into dark rituals. Banished by the community, and left to die in the harsh winter, her body was never found. After that, people started reporting strange disappearances and disturbing hauntings. Coincidence? Or is the forest holding on to old grudges and darker secrets? As the years went by, stories of occult rituals and mysterious symbols kept surfacing with disturbing frequency. Older residents avoided the forest at night, claiming to hear voices whispering names, like they were calling for new victims. Burkittsville gained a reputation, but not the good kind. It became one of those towns where time doesn't seem to follow normal rules, like a time loop disguised as a quiet small town, and those who wander into the woods don't always come back the same, if they come back at all. Now here's where things get interesting. Many of these reports were brushed off as nothing more than urban legends, just tales from overly superstitious folks. But across all the stories, there were eerie consistencies, identical symbols hanging from trees, ghostly female figures dressed in old-fashioned clothes, and people vanishing the moment they got too close to the edge of the Black Hills. No one could explain it, but no one really dared to doubt it either. The fear was quiet, but constant, almost like a presence of its own. The name Ellie Kedward started to vanish from conversation, and that's when things got weirder. Old maps of the area show subtle shifts in the forest's boundaries over the years, like the woods were slowly expanding, swallowing parts of the town. Official records ignore this, but copies made by locals show the difference. Time in that place feels distorted, a strange preview of what filmmakers would tap into years later using found footage and psychological horror as tools. So when the Blair Witch Project hit theaters in 1999, it didn't invent fear. It gave cinematic form to something that had already haunted the minds of those who knew the legend. The film captured just a fragment of the terror. The real power of the story lies in what you don't see, what you can feel, but not explain. And that brings us to what many truly believe. The Black Hills Forest isn't just a setting, it's part of the entity itself. And it's not an exaggeration to say that the Black Hills Forest seems to have a will of its own. Over the years, stories piled up, compasses spinning out of control, voices from nowhere, strange symbols appearing overnight where nothing was before, the feeling of being watched, almost constant. People who got lost in those woods say time felt like it slowed down, or even looped. It's as if the very fabric of space is warped, corrupted by an invisible force, a malevolent spirit hiding behind the illusion of nature. This forest doesn't need monsters jumping out from behind trees. It is the monster. Folklore experts call this kind of place a liminal space, a zone where reality's rules begin to unravel. In Black Hills, that breakdown shows up through strange behavior, dark rituals, hidden symbols, and the way people lose their grip after spending too much time there. It's like the forest infects the human mind, slowly, quietly, like a poison you don't notice until it's too late. Some people have tried to map the forest. It never works. Marked trails disappear, trees move, landmarks vanish like they were never there. That only fuels the theory that the forest operates in a time loop, folding in on itself like a movie played in reverse. And guess what? Those same effects show up in the 1999 film, but not as special effects. They were inspired by real stories collected over years from locals and explorers around Burkittsville. In many of those stories, people talk about symbols of protection drawn on the ground, talismans made from twisted branches, even personal belongings from missing persons turning up in impossible places. It's not just superstition, it's a pattern, a dark pattern, repeating itself like a ritual in progress. And the forest? It's always watching. Some say it's the prison for Ellie Kedward's soul. Others believe she became the forest itself. But one thing no one doubts is this: the Black Hills Forest isn't just a location, it's a character. Maybe the most powerful character in the whole Blair Witch story. It makes the rules. And once you step inside, you're no longer sure if you'll ever leave, or if you'll leave the same. And that sets the stage for the next twist in this journey, when filming turns into ritual, and horror stops being fiction. When the Blair Witch Project premiered in 1999, a lot of people left the theater in total silence, not because it wasn't scary, but because there was something else, something that stuck to your skin. The reason? What looked like a simple horror movie was actually a carefully crafted experience, almost ritualistic in nature. Nothing about that production was done the conventional way. The actors, for example, didn't have a fixed script. They got vague instructions in envelopes left at their campsite, like pieces on a board being moved by some unseen hand. This choice to rely on total improvisation is what gave the film its raw, visceral energy. The production team deliberately created real tension, depriving the actors of food, comfort, and sleep, while inserting unsettling moments without warning. They had no idea what was coming next, and it shows in their faces. What we see on screen feels real, because in many ways, it was. It was as if the act of filming itself became a dark ritual, one where each genuine reaction only fed the presence of that invisible, malevolent force. There's a powerful symbolism in the way everything unfolds. The forest becomes a prison, and the camera, ironically, turns into a form of protection. Constant filming becomes their only link to reality, but also the one thing that documents their psychological collapse. This paradox is part of the appeal of found footage. We're witnessing everything firsthand, but it also feels like we shouldn't be watching. It's like spying on a ritual we were never invited to. Another interesting layer is how the off-screen crew manipulated the environment, planting creepy objects, scattering occult symbols, creating sounds, and setting psychological traps. The film wasn't just acted, it was lived. The absence of traditional special effects created space for fear to emerge from what's not seen, and that ties directly into the essence of the Ellie Kedward legend. She never actually appears, yet she's always there. In the end, one question lingers. Was it all just a performance or a summoning? The line between reality and fiction was deliberately blurred, and the audience, just like the characters, ended up playing the game without realizing it. And since we're talking about sensory manipulation, let's move on to the technical details that made this experience even more terrifying, sometimes in complete silence. Very few films have managed to turn technical limitations into such effective tools of psychological horror like the Blair Witch Project. Unlike big-budget productions filled with visual effects, here, the fear comes from silence, from the lack of music, and from the feeling of disorientation. The ambient sound of the forest, recorded on location, creates real discomfort, as if you're right there, lost in those thick woods, hearing branches snap, people breathing, and whispers in the distance. The unease isn't accidental, it's intentional, and it works. One of the most effective tricks used was sound manipulation. In many scenes, what you don't hear weighs heavier than what you do. This choice makes even the smallest noise hit like thunder. And of course, the absence of music keeps your brain on constant alert, like something awful is about to happen at any moment. It mirrors the atmosphere of dark rituals, where silence plays a symbolic role, setting the stage for fear to take over. Another brilliant detail is how the film plays with visual perception. The footage is shaky, poorly framed, and often too dark. Some criticized that back then, but today, it's seen as a masterstroke. The lack of clarity activates the viewer's imagination, And what you imagine is usually scarier than any monster on screen. That visual improvisation reflects the mental chaos of the characters, who slowly lose all sense of time and space, trapped in an invisible time loop. And what about the compass? It points nowhere. The attempt to use something as basic as a compass to navigate becomes yet another source of frustration and dread. That subtle yet powerful detail shows how even logic fails in the Black Hills forest. The entity there doesn't just haunt, it interferes with nature's laws, distorting perception, twisting paths, and breaking down the sanity of its victims. It's horror as a sensory experience where even your compass turns against you. The film's greatest technical achievement is making the audience feel exactly what the characters feel: confusion, mounting fear, and total helplessness. By stripping away traditional cinematic elements, the creators made room for something raw and deeply unsettling. But all of this takes on even more meaning when we realize maybe what's happening isn't just a one-time event. Maybe it's part of a cycle, a curse that replays over and over again. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. There's something deeply disturbing about the idea that the characters in the Blair Witch Project aren't just lost in space, but possibly in time as well. The story subtly suggests a temporal loop, where events repeat themselves as part of an eternal ritual. A key moment is when the group walks all day in a straight line, only to end up in the same exact spot. That's not just a navigational error, it's a clue. Something in those woods doesn't follow the rules of the natural world. And it doesn't stop there. The character's behavior starts to shift as the days go by. Mike, for example, enters a trance-like state. His final scene, standing in the corner of the basement, directly echoes the story of Rustin Parr, the man who in the 1940s confessed to killing children under the orders of a mysterious voice. He also made his victims face the wall before committing the murders. Coincidence? Or is the malevolent entity recreating its rituals again and again? This parallel between past and present builds the sense that no one is in control. It's as if the forest is recruiting new victims to reenact the same tragic events, like actors unaware they're in a play. It connects with the idea of dark rituals and cyclical hauntings, common in urban legends. What if each disappearance is just another version of the same tragedy? What if the forest is stuck in a ritual pattern, repeating endlessly? This theme of repetition, reinforced by the visuals, the sounds, the dialogue, and even the warped geography of Black Hills, adds a philosophical layer to the horror. The real fear doesn't come just from death, but from the impossibility of escape. Imagine being trapped in a nightmare that never ends, where every attempt to leave just takes you back to the beginning. Maybe the worst kind of torture isn't physical, but psychological. It's the kind of fear that stays with you long after the movie ends. And all of this makes us wonder, how much of what we saw on screen was just a movie? Or were we witnessing another turn in an ancient, repeating cycle of horror? Were the missing filmmakers just one group among many? There are no clear answers, and that's what makes it so terrifying. And speaking of messing with people's minds, let's talk about how all of this was amplified by a dark, innovative marketing campaign that fooled the whole world. What would you do if you saw a missing persons poster on a telephone pole in your city, only to find out later that it was part of a movie campaign? That's exactly what the creators of the Blair Witch Project did back in 1999. Before the movie even hit theaters, they were already planting seeds of doubt in the public's mind through a marketing strategy that became legendary, a viral campaign that blurred the line between fiction and reality like never before. The result? A collective confusion that was both thrilling and chilling. At the time, the internet was still in its early days, but the producers saw an opportunity. They created a website that looked like a real investigation archive, complete with missing person profiles, clips of fake documentaries, and interviews with supposed Burkittsville locals. It was all so well crafted that a lot of people genuinely believed the story was real. And of course, that made the movie's impact even greater. By the time people sat down in the theater, they were already knee-deep in the mystery. Beyond the internet, the marketing campaign included fake interviews, subtle appearances on TV shows, and even fabricated police reports, all carefully crafted to feel 100% authentic. It was as if the real world had been taken over by a supernatural mystery, turning the film's release into something almost ritualistic. The audience wasn't just watching, they were participating, and that created an emotional engagement rarely seen in cinema. The campaign was so effective that even after the premiere, a lot of people still believed the events had actually happened. The impact was so powerful that some fans even traveled to the Black Hills forest searching for clues about the missing filmmakers. The production pulled off the unthinkable. They turned a low-budget indie film into a modern urban legend, spreading by word of mouth, click by click, like a fear virus infecting the world. And that's where the real power of this strategy lies. It made the audience a part of the story. No one could tell what was real and what was staged. The horror leapt off the screen and into everyday life, deepening that feeling of vulnerability. But the most mind-blowing part was still to come. How did a movie made with pocket change go on to earn hundreds of millions of dollars? The answer lies in our next topic, where we'll explore the monster-sized success built on a microscopic budget. Imagine investing the price of a used car into a movie, and just a few months later watching that amount multiply by over 4,000 times. Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened with the Blair Witch Project. With a budget of around $60,000, the film grossed over $250 million worldwide. That's right, a box office phenomenon built on simplicity, creativity, and a deep understanding of what truly frightens people. The secret wasn't flashy special effects or celebrity actors. It was the psychological terror that suggests but never shows. The lack of concrete answers created a lasting discomfort, and the fact that it felt so real, thanks to the found footage style, the actors' improvisation, and that masterful marketing, left audiences walking out of theaters unsure whether to laugh, cry, or pray. The real battlefield was inside the viewer's mind. On top of that, the film's documentary style made production dirt cheap. One camera, natural light, real locations. That was all they needed to tell the story. It gave the creators complete freedom and made the immersion so much more intense. The lack of resources became an ally, not an obstacle. And the film's explosive success proved one thing: you don't need millions to make an impact. You need one strong idea, executed with guts and authenticity. What's even more fascinating is that this success was never meant to go global. The filmmakers just wanted to experiment, try something different, but they struck a nerve in the collective soul of the audience. At a time when horror movies were drowning in tired cliches, the Blair Witch Project hit like a punch to the face. It was living proof that true fear doesn't need to be shown, it needs to be felt. And that feeling was so strong, so unforgettable, that the movie ended up redefining the entire genre. It inspired a new wave of horror that didn't rely on gore, but on tension. And that leads us to the next chapter, the long-lasting legacy this film left, not just in cinema, but across pop culture, including games, series, and even real-life paranormal investigations. Very few films have caused the kind of cultural ripple effect that the Blair Witch Project did. More than just a box office success, it became a definitive reference in psychological horror. Its raw approach, use of found footage, urban legend elements, and refusal to give clear answers inspired a whole new generation of storytellers, ones who preferred to suggest rather than show. Films like Paranormal Activity, REC, and even games like Outlast drew directly from its blueprint. But it didn't stop at entertainment. That eerie sense of a distorted reality the film created sparked real curiosity. Many people began investigating the story as if it were real, exploring the Black Hills forest in search of hidden symbols, strange artifacts, and even lost tapes. To this day, paranormal investigators still roam through Burkittsville, trying to uncover what lies behind the legend of Ellie Kedward. The film's technical legacy is just as impressive. Before Blair Witch, improvisation in horror was seen as risky. Afterward, it became a gold standard. Putting actors in real, limited situations without full scripts opened the door to more raw and intense narratives, and all of it done on a shoestring budget. It shattered the old rulebook. You don't need a blockbuster to scare people. You just need to understand human nature and know how to push the right buttons. Visually, the film also left a huge mark. The shaky cam, the absence of a musical score, the oppressive atmosphere, these all became staples for horror stories aiming for realism and immersion. Even the fake documentary format caught fire, showing up in TV series, YouTube videos, and indie horror projects everywhere. The Blair Witch Project wasn't just a movie, it was a turning point. But maybe the most impressive thing is this: decades later, the name Blair Witch still gives people chills. It's still talked about, still studied, still spawning theories. It's like the film itself became part of the myth, proving that some stories don't die, they transform. And speaking of mind-blowing numbers, Up next, we'll dive into the insane contrast between the film's tiny budget and its massive box office explosion. In Hollywood, million-dollar budgets are nothing new, but when a film made for just $60,000 earns over $250 million, we're not just talking success anymore, we're talking legend. That feat landed the Blair Witch Project in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most profitable movie in history, based on return on investment. So the big question is, how was that even possible? The answer? A perfect storm of innovation, timing, and a deep instinctive grasp of what makes people afraid. First, the low budget forced the filmmakers to get creative, and that worked in their favor. No big sets, no fancy effects. Everything was shot in the actual Black Hills forest, using basic gear, natural light, and unscripted moments. This gave the film such a documentary vibe that people couldn't tell where the fiction ended and reality began. And that's where the second ace came in, the viral marketing, the one that had already planted seeds of doubt long before the film hit theaters. Directors Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez knew they had something different, but they had no idea how big it would become. At first, the movie played at small festivals like Sundance, where it caused a massive stir. From there, word of mouth did the rest. People weren't just going to the movies, they were searching for answers. And the strange part? They never got any. That only made the buzz grow. Plus, the found footage format offered a huge economic advantage. The movie could look amateur, and instead of being a flaw, it added authenticity. Every shaky frame, every out-of-focus shot, every audio glitch, it all worked. That flipped the entire logic of traditional filmmaking and made producers around the world rethink what was possible. With the right idea, anyone could make a hit. And this dramatic contrast between the tiny budget and the massive return became part of the myth itself. It's not just the story that haunts people, it's the phenomenon of the Blair Witch Project. And that success is what helped keep the legend alive. But now, let's take one step further, back to one of the film's most intriguing ideas. The repetition of time, the warped sense of reality, and how the forest might just be trapped in an infinite loop of terror. One of the most unsettling elements in the Blair Witch Project isn't about creatures hiding in the dark. It's the broken sense of time that shapes the entire narrative. The film drops subtle clues that the characters aren't just lost in the woods, but trapped in a time loop. That scene where they walk for hours only to end up at the same fallen tree? It says it all. No matter which way they go, the forest pushes them back. It's as if time follows its own twisted rules inside those woods. And this warped timeline isn't just a clever plot device. It has deep roots in folklore and urban legends about haunted places. Many cultures speak of locations where time doesn't pass, or loops endlessly, usually tied to unresolved tragedies or ancient rituals. In the Black Hills, all signs point to that kind of energy. Watches stop working, daylight follows no normal pattern, and even the characters' bodies begin to react as if time itself is spinning in circles. This repetition also shows up in the way the characters behave. Their panic doesn't grow gradually. It resets and returns in new forms day after day. Mike, for example, goes from confused to emotionally numb in just a few hours. Heather shifts from a confident leader to someone emotionally shattered. It's as if the forest is rewriting their personalities, slowly preparing them for the inevitable end, like a dark ritual stuck on repeat. You also see this cycle in the recurring symbols that appear throughout the movie. The same stick figures hanging from trees, the same twig amulets, the same strange sounds at night. None of it really changes. It just reappears. As if every group that enters the forest lives the same nightmare, with slight variations but always the same ending. This almost ritualistic repetition reinforces the idea that the forest isn't just a backdrop. It's a system, a closed, cursed system. And the most intriguing part? None of this is ever explicitly explained. No one says, "We're stuck in a loop," but you feel it, and that feeling stays with you. You walk away from the movie asking yourself, were they doomed from the very beginning? That unanswered question opens the door for the next layer that makes the film so raw and immersive, total improvisation, where the actors lived the fear without knowing what was coming next. Now imagine walking into the forest with a camera in your hand and no idea what's going to happen to you in the coming days. That's how the actors in the Blair Witch Project dove headfirst into the experience that would change their lives. With no fixed script, they were only given vague instructions like, argue with each other or someone should leave the group today. This full-on improvisational approach made the fear feel real, not acted but experienced. And that, my friend, makes all the difference on screen. Every day, each actor received a private envelope with individual instructions. The goal was to create real tension between them. No rehearsals, no retakes. What got filmed stayed in the film. This built an environment of constant psychological pressure, where no one could be sure what was part of the production and what was the forest messing with their minds. The crew would mess with their campsite, steal supplies, or scare them during the night. In other words, it was like a horror-themed reality show, but they didn't know the rules. This method might sound extreme, and it was, but the results were powerful. The fear, the crying, the frustration, you see, it's all real, especially in the final scenes. Take Heather's famous monologue, with the camera right up in her face, tears streaming down. That's not an actress playing fear. That's a person genuinely exhausted, starving, and terrified, with no clue what's coming next. That rawness is what elevated the film to a whole new level of psychological horror. And what's fascinating is that this improvisation didn't lead to chaos. On the contrary, it created authenticity. It's something audiences pick up on, even if they can't explain why. It's not about cheap jump scares. It's a slow, creeping discomfort. The lack of traditional acting made it feel more like a real documentary, which only strengthened the illusion that what we were watching might actually be real. At that point, the movie stops being just a piece of fiction. It becomes a social experiment in fear. The success of this approach opened the door for a new way of making horror films, one that broke all the old rules. No scripted lines, no fancy shots, just raw fear as the central material. A huge risk, but in this case it paid off. Big time. And now that we've uncovered the secrets, techniques, and legends behind this phenomenon, there's only one thing left to do: tie it all together with a reflective, thought-provoking conclusion. Now that you've explored the behind-the-scenes, the rituals, and the hidden horrors of the Blair Witch Project, let me ask you this: will you ever watch that movie the same way again? Or will you start to notice the hidden symbols, the time loops, the psychological dread that goes way beyond the screen? Maybe the Black Hills Forest isn't just fiction. Maybe it's a mirror of our deepest fears, the ones that don't have a face but definitely have a presence. Was the film's success pure luck, or a formula that only works when you truly understand human fear at its core? And if you were in that forest, would you trust your senses, or would you start following the whispers, the ones calling your name on the wind? Think about how reality starts to shift when we're exposed to doubt, suggestion, and above all, silence. If this video sparked your curiosity, made you see horror through a different lens, or left you with that little nagging feeling in the back of your mind, then mission accomplished. But this is just the beginning. Here on the channel, there's so much more about films, legends, and mysteries that'll mess with your head in the best way possible. So hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and share this video with that one friend who thinks they know everything about the Blair Witch Project. Spoiler alert, they don't. And you, are you still sure you're alone in that room?